These Formula Racing fatal crashes are easily the weirdest and most bizarre the sport has ever seen. Forget the usual high-speed impacts. These drivers lost their lives in the strangest, most unexpected ways imaginable. Roger Williamson was a 25-year-old British racing driver and two-time British Formula 3 champion. He had debuted in Formula 1 just weeks earlier at Silverstone, or the British GP, and had managed 2 race starts in F1. The 1973 Dutch Grand Prix at Zandvoort was only Williamson's second World Championship race. Zandvoort is a fast seaside circuit in the dunes of the Netherlands, where safety facilities in the early 1970s were rudimentary. On lap 8 of the race, Williamson's March 731 was at Hondenvlak section when his left front tire exploded. The car snapped and hit the inside Armco barrier at near full speed. Crucially, that section of barrier had been erected improperly. Its end created a ramp that flipped Williamson's car into the air. The car flipped upside down and burst into flames. The fuel tank ruptured, and the car was soon engulfed in a massive fireball while sliding along the track for around 300 yards. Remarkably, Williamson suffered no fatal impact injuries. He was alive and conscious, but trapped under the overturned burning cockpit. In 1973, there were no fire suppression systems on board the car. Cars of that era had no automatic extinguishers, and the open roll hoops and fuel tank layout offered little protection in a fire. Fellow driver and Williamson's friend, David Purley, who witnessed the crash, abandoned his own race and ran across the active track to help. With flames surrounding Williamson, Purley first attempted to right the car by hand. When alone, he could not. He seized a handheld extinguisher and returned to spray the blaze. The fire marshal was slow to react, and local marshals wearing ordinary clothes with no protective gear stood aside. Purley shouted and gestured angrily at approaching drivers, trying to wave them down for help, but none stopped. Drivers assumed the burnt-out car on track was Purley's, thinking he'd bailed out, and so continued racing. As minutes passed with no help, Purley's frantic efforts failed, and a fire truck finally arrived 8 minutes after the crash. By then, the flames were extinguished, but Williamson had succumbed to asphyxiation, inhaling hot, toxic gases while trapped beneath his car. Henry Surtees was a British racing driver and the only son of 1964 F1 world champion John Surtees. As a rookie in 2009, he drove a Williams JPH-1 No. 7 in the resurrected FIA Formula 2 Championship, which was managed by Motorsport Vision. He had previously placed third in Formula 2 that season and won races in junior formats, including 1 victory and a pole in British Formula BMW UK. In the F2 race on July 19, 2009, Surtees was at Brands Hatch, England. On lap 9, at Westfield Bend after the Derek Minter Straight, a car ahead, driven by Jack Clark, went offline and slammed into the exterior wall. After tethers failed, Clark's rear left wheel came loose and flew back onto the active racing line. That wheel struck Surtees' helmet at high speed, about 100 miles per hour at the time. The 64-pound wheel delivered roughly 30,000 joules of kinetic energy on impact.
Well, he's gone on the wheel, took right across the nose of Henry Surtees' car. And that's a very nasty-looking accident, and worry immediately.
Surtees was instantly unconscious, and his car kept going straight into the barrier on the way to Sheen Curve. The car hit the barrier and came to rest at the end of the curve, with the engine at its limiter and the surviving rear wheel still spinning. The fact that Surtees' foot was still hitting the accelerator suggested that he had already passed out. Medics extracted him from the car and took him to the on-site medical center, then transferred him by helicopter to the Royal London Hospital. Surtees was declared brain dead later that day and died from the head injuries. The wheel impact, not the secondary crash, was deemed the fatal cause. He was only 18 years old. Marco Campos was one of Brazil's most promising young drivers of the 1990s. A dominant karter in South America, He won multiple continental titles before moving to Europe in 1994 and immediately claiming the Formula Opel Lotus Euro Series championship with 5 wins. Backed by Brazilian sponsors, he stepped up to International Formula 3000 in 1995 with Draco. The results were modest, but his skill still stood out. At just 19 years old, Campos was widely regarded as a long-term prospect rather than a finished product, a driver still learning at the high level of junior single-seaters. That promise was cut short on October 15, 1995, during the International F3000 season finale at Manicourt, France, the last race of the series before its transition to a spec chassis format. On the final lap, Campos battled with Thomas Biaggi approaching the high-speed Adelaide hairpin. Attempting an inside pass, his Lola Cosworth made wheel-to-wheel contact with Biaggi's car, causing Campos's car to launch airborne and flip upside down. In mid-flight, his helmet struck the concrete retaining wall.
This is the battle for 9th and 10th. Oh, and Campos hits the back of Thomas Biaggi's car in a horrendous shot, hits the wall on the inside of Adelaide.
Medical teams quickly extricated Campos from the car, provided on-site care, and airlifted him to Lariboisière Hospital in Paris. Neurosurgeons operated to reduce intracranial pressure, the pressure within the skull exerted by brain tissue, blood, and cerebrospinal fluid, but the injuries proved irreversible. He remained in a coma with no significant brain activity and sadly passed away the following afternoon, October 16, 1995. Campos remains the only driver to ever get killed in International Formula 3000. Jules Bianchi was a highly regarded young driver in modern Formula One, part of the Ferrari Driver Academy, and widely expected to move to a top team. Born in 1989, he progressed through junior categories with strong results and joined Marussia team in 2013. By 2014, he had already scored the team's first ever points and established himself as a standout performer. On October 5th, at the Japanese Grand Prix at Suzuka Circuit, he was racing in extreme wet conditions caused by a typhoon, with visibility reduced and water flowing across the circuit. On lap 42, Adrian Sutil spun off at Dunlop Curve. A recovery crane was deployed behind the barrier to remove the car under double yellow flags. 1 lap later, Bianchi approached the same corner on a partially drying racing line that had suddenly become flooded by runoff water. His Marussia MR03 aquaplaned and rotated, leaving the track earlier than Sutil had. Instead of sliding along the usual runoff path, his trajectory angled upstream toward the exact position of the recovery vehicle. At the same moment, telemetry showed he applied both throttle and brake, causing front wheel lock and preventing effective deceleration. A brake-by-wire system limitation also prevented automatic engine power cut, leaving higher residual speed until he finally hit the rear of that recovery vehicle.
Sutil lost control on the outside of turn 7.
Adrian, are you okay?
The race was immediately red-flagged, and Bianchi was extracted unconscious and airlifted to hospital. The collision caused a diffuse axonal injury, a very severe form of traumatic brain injury involving widespread shearing of nerve fibers in the brain, as the collision angle placed the cockpit directly under that recovery vehicle structure, concentrating force on the driver's head area. Unlike typical barrier impacts, this involved a rigid, elevated object with no energy absorption. He was then placed in an induced coma and later transferred to a hospital in Nice, France, where he remained in a coma for the next 9 months. On July 17, 2015, at the age of 25, Bianchi passed away in the hospital from the consequences of that brain injury. His death made him the first Formula One driver to succumb to injuries sustained during a race weekend accident since Ayrton Senna in 1994, and directly accelerated major safety changes in Formula One, including the introduction of the Halo cockpit protection device.